And we're back with a Tab Media special report. Our guest is Dr. Jeff Iorg, President and CEO of the Southern Baptist Convention Executive Committee. Dr. Iorg, thank you for being with us.
Hey, thank you for inviting me.
All right. Well, you have been on the job, I think exactly 10 months today. It's Thursday, March the 13th, and I think it's been exactly 10 months. Is that accurate?
I think you're right. I started on May 13th last year.
Okay, so before we get into the hard questions, tell us what it's been like with the transition. What did you expect and it's come true, and what did you not expect and you've experienced since you started?
Well, the job itself has been largely what I expected. I knew there were many challenges, and that's proven to be true, but I've not been really surprised by what I've encountered or frustrated or discouraged by it. It's simply a lot of work to be done and challenges to be met. On the personal side, the upheaval was significant. We were not really at a point in our lives where we planned on making this much change. And so we have had to sell our home in California, relocate to both Portland, Oregon, where we will ultimately live someday, and Nashville, Tennessee, where we're now living. And then all the challenges and transition that goes along with that. It's been quite a year, but we did the right thing in following God to this position. And so my wife and I both feel like that whatever personal adjustments we have to make, we just have to make them.
Well, on that note, do you have any advice for many of us out there that may be sensing God's call in a way, but it is super scary or definitely not what we want to do? Anything that you would provide there?
Well, I would say, and it may sound trite, but obey God. If God is calling you to do something, obey Him, and trust that all of the other aspects of life will eventually come into focus if you obey God. And I think that the upheaval that may come along with obedience may be discouraging or cause us to think we made the wrong decision. That's not necessarily the case. It's just God reordering our lives around His purposes. And so if God is calling you to do something, obey Him and let everything else fall into line behind that decision of obedience.
Well, we are thankful that you are obeying and helping lead right now. We can sense from the journalist side, the reporter side, the communicator side, we can sense the calming of the waters that are happening because
Thank you.
upheaval is probably a good word that you used. Southern Baptists have traditionally been known for missions and ministry, but these past 3 years, it seems that the business side and the difficult business side of Southern Baptist has been more in the news. And I know you've referenced that many times, how you're ready to get that behind us so that we're back to missions and ministry. So let's jump in there. Yesterday, March 12, was the big announcement of the DOJ's closing of the investigation into Southern Baptist entities at large, all of the grouping there. Help me understand a little bit about what that was like to go through and anything you can share. I know you can't share much, but whatever you have.
Well, frankly, in my 10-month tenure, there's been very little activity on this investigation. I personally have not engaged it at all in terms of being interviewed or anything like that, because it had largely been completed, but these things take time to even come to a final conclusion. And so we've been waiting for that to occur, and it finally did. So for me personally, it hasn't been a difficult process except for the waiting. And if you know me well, you know I don't like to wait, but waiting for the conclusion to finally be announced. And we are grateful for the conclusion that has been reached. No charges filed, and we are grateful that we can now close that chapter of our legal challenges and move forward.
And from what we reported, we kind of backed into it by calling each entity leader and finding out if they'd been interviewed. From what we could tell from the Baptist paper, the Alabama Baptist side, was it primarily ended up focusing on the executive committee, Southwestern Seminary, and maybe one or two other seminaries, but that was about what we could determine. Does that seem fair?
That's probably, well, I would say that that's probably correct. I'm hesitant to say absolutely because I haven't gone back and read all that information or reviewed all those files, but it was more of a targeted investigation. Yes.
Makes sense. And can you estimate at all what the final legal fees will be for this one slice of all the legal fees?
Right. We had said at the end of December, the last reporting period that we had, that it was just a little over $2 million that we had spent defending ourselves against the Department of Justice investigation, and um, are responding to, I should say, as the Department investigation.
Right.
It won't be much more than that. There's been very little activity in the investigation, and our attorneys have done very little on it over the past few months. So it won't be much more than we reported in December, but we'll have a final reporting probably by end of this quarter, or certainly by the summer.
Okay. Okay. And then speaking of legal fees, so that amount plus whatever else has happened, make sure I have my numbers right. We're looking at 13 million has been spent, 3 million's pending, anticipated 3 million more. That's where all the numbers got together to how the budget was proposed and will be proposed to the messengers, with the potential of 3 million out of cooperative program dollars to help offset the legal fees. And all of that information is covered. But let me jump to those other lawsuits. Talk to me about what that looks like. I know the Johnny Hunt lawsuit tends to be the one that's pending out there, the largest. Are there any others at that level? And then
Mhm.
can you give me any kind of numbers of how many are pending, how many have been solved, and how does this match with years before all of this?
Well, they're really the legal challenges in the lawsuits really fall into two categories now that the Department of Justice has been resolved.
Okay.
The first set of suits are those that emerged out of the guidepost report, or out of the work directly of the convention, or the executive committee, or the credentials committee. And there are really three of those. The suits filed by Johnny Hunt, David Sills, and Preston Garner. Those are the three that are most significantly related to the issues that arose in the past 2 or 3 years, or say the past 4 years in the convention.
Mhm.
The other set of, and those are by far the most expensive. Those are the ones that are really expensive to litigate and to work through.
Right.
On the other side are a host of lawsuits where we are simply named in the suit. So, for example, an allegation of abuse is made at a church somewhere that is affiliated with Southern Baptist. And typically, if there's a lawsuit filed,
Mhm.
it will be filed against the church, oftentimes against the association, the state
Mhm.
convention, the executive committee of the Southern Baptist Convention, and the Southern Baptist Convention separately. So we're named in a number of those, but they're really not the focus of our legal response, and they're really not that expensive in terms of the response that we make to them, because in most cases we simply have to go through the process of explaining to courts why, because of our polity, we are not responsible nationally for what may have happened in a local environment. And we're not minimizing what may have happened. We're not saying there's nothing to the allegation. We're not making any value judgment at all about it. We're simply saying that these other inclusions are really not appropriate in these legal actions. And so that's been going on for a long time in Southern Baptist life, and will continue to go on in the future. And so the focus that we have at the executive committee is really on these first three lawsuits that I just mentioned, and getting those resolved hopefully over the next year or two, so that we can move on from them into what is really a more normal kind of legal action, and that is dealing with these other kinds of suits that where we are named, but we're really not the focus of the legal action.
Mm. Any idea though how many of those exist?
I'd hesitate to say, because it changes. It honestly changes every week as
Right.
some new ones are added and old ones are
Right.
taken out.
Mhm.
And but so I would know, I wouldn't give a number today.
And I remember the previous attorneys that were with the Southern Baptist Convention
Mhm,
Executive Committee for decades,
mhm,
talking about these kinds of lawsuits
mhm.
and saying that it was like 50 to 0 as far as we, as SSBC Executive Committee would explain, like you're saying, what was going on, they would be removed from the lawsuit. So,
We have a strong track record of that happening, and frankly, it is it's not that we keep winning because of our attorneys. We keep winning because the law is clear that we're not responsible, and therefore we get dismissed from these suits quite frequently. So.
right, right. And then I know that some of that plays out with the concern of does that mean we're not caring about these situations? And you mentioned that that's not
Mm,
what you're saying there, but
mm,
help us understand a little bit about all that's happening in the sexual abuse reform and response kinds
mm.
of things right now.
Well, sexual abuse is a horrific problem, and when it occurs, it is catastrophic in the lives of everyone involved, particularly the survivor. And our uh, our hearts are broken, frankly, by any incident of this. Um, so we're working proactively to put into place a denominational infrastructure or framework that will uh, help prevent this from happening going forward. The convention last summer gave the executive committee the responsibility of deciding where to place sexual abuse prevention and response, what I will say in the SBC ecosystem, where does it fit best? We considered many options and ultimately decided to retain it at the executive committee, which we've done. Once the executive committee made that decision in September, then we started the process of staffing for that, and we've employed Jeff Dalrymple, who is the national director. He's just recently hired an assistant to work with him, and so now we're building that team out. And so starting in January of this year, we've been working proactively to put into place the first set of steps that we hope to accomplish by June. We're revising the essentials curriculum to a beta version to make it stronger and more applicable in state by state cases for churches to use. We are working to network the state convention leadership more aggressively, where they're meeting more regularly so that they are really a unified team, if you will, working across state conventions as well with Jeff Dalrymple and our national EC as a team. We're revising significantly the SBC abuse prevention website, and not only the resources that are being included there, but the publication of that, the wide, how making it more widely available, more making it more higher profile in its promotion. We are working to create an event this summer at the SBC called Safeguarding the Next Generation, which will be designed to both highlight our response,
Mhm.
provide information and resources to people who attend, and just further the momentum that we're trying to build. So we have a set of recommendations we're working on that we're trying to get done by June. And then the next wave will be for the next year. And my goal is in this 18-month window to build what I call the framework of response. Here's the framework of how we can respond. And then let's work that framework for a decade. And let's make a real difference in what we're doing in terms of equipping churches about the issues of sexual abuse prevention and response, and then also responding to these incidents when they occur in ways that are really helpful to the churches and that they can make the best response possible.
Mm. And to clarify on the one big piece that people have been waiting on, the database, can you clarify how
Mhm.
that's going to work or not work
Well,
going
there,
forward?
we are not in the process of developing a database. What
Right.
we're in the process of doing is helping to create resources so that state by state churches will know how to access existing databases and
Mhm.
how they will be able to get the information they need to make good background investigations in the people and background studies and reports in the people that they're considering either using in volunteer or paid capacity, particularly that work with minors. And so, we're focusing right now on the immediate, what is already available, the immediate capacity that churches have to get the information they need from what's already there. And then perhaps in the future, we can talk about other options, but that's what we're really focusing on right now.
So would the best route for a church who's needing to check something or just concerned, should they go to association, then state convention, and then executive committee, or what route would you suggest?
No, I think that churches well, they can contact their state convention or the executive committee, and we can help them to understand how they can contact, you know,
Mhm.
the individual databases that are available that are state by state. This is one of the things that is a challenge,
Yeah.
and that is that you need to not only ask the information of the state where the person is, where the church is currently located, but maybe any other places a person has ever worked if you're considering employing them. And so I'm reluctant to give an answer because it's almost a state by state thing, but
Right.
that's why we need a state by state convention network to be working with us to make this happen on a personal basis and a precise basis, state by state.
And
I know
that's
that, for example, I lived in California, and at the seminary we had not only we had prescribed ways of doing this, but we also had ways that were prescribed by the state of California that we had to meet, and that we had to meet certain standards, and that we had to use certain resources to be able to do that. And so it's really that kind of customized approach that we're striving to put into place.
And that was an interesting discovery about the state to state concepts versus I think where maybe the thought pattern started, it was a national piece. So that was
Right.
interesting to discover.
Well, and there are national databases, and then there are state by state databases, and then there is the need to help people to learn how to access them in ways that really do get them the information they need. It's a challenging problem, and we're working the problem, and hopefully, as we get to this summer and then into the next year, it's going to become much more clear to people how they can do this.
That makes sense. Okay, one final question, I'll let you go. Credentials committee. Help us understand kind of what's happening there. I know there's some chatter happening and some confusion
Mhm.
and discussions. And in the past, my understanding was that the credentials committee information was confidential if a church was allowed to stay, nothing was found. But it seems like now more information is being leaked out or floated out, which is causing the next level of conversations. Can you just kind of speak to all of that and what you anticipate with that information happening and going into the meeting in June?
Well, the Credentials Committee does a tremendous amount of work that involves a mountain of information. It's
Correct.
one of the most challenging committees really ever created. It's volunteers, about 9 or 10 of them, who come together for 2 to 3 hours every month or so to try to process and work through the information that's provided to them. They also get a lot of confidential information that's not only issues about sexual abuse prevention and response and churches that have alleged sexual abuse activity in them, but also a lot of confidential information about churches that are related to other issues, like, for example, women pastors, information about personnel decisions, internal policies, etc. And the committee has a very challenging job of working through all that and making difficult choices. So I'm confident that they're doing the best they can. I think they are constantly working on how to improve their processes and do the best job possible. So we have a challenging situation to work through because of the way the committee is structured and the amount of information they're trying to manage and the amount of work they're being asked to do. And so I think in the future, I believe we're going to have to make some revisions to how they do their work, just because it's becoming a really challenging process for them to manage and to even keep up with all that they're being asked to do. So those are some reflections I have about that. It's a long way till June. We'll see how things develop between now and the convention, but these are issues that are ongoing in our minds about how to improve their function and how to help them do the job that they've been asked to do.
Yeah, makes sense. And you're right. Lots can happen between now and June. So,
Yeah.
well, Dr. Orge, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and helping us understand a little bit more about all the elements going on.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. You know, these are challenging times among Southern Baptists, but I want to remind everyone that the global mission of God is so much bigger than these small problems we're talking about right now. And yes, these issues have to be addressed and we need to work on them. And I'm glad to step in at this time in my life and devote some years to trying to make to resolve some of these issues. But what really drives Southern Baptists is thousands of missionaries, hundreds of church plants, thousands and thousands of students in our schools, and thinking about the future possibility of what we're going to impact, how we're going to impact the world because of all that. So while, yes, it's interesting to talk about these challenges and problems, and yes, they must be addressed, and we must find ways to improve ourselves always. Let's not lose sight of the bigger picture of what God is doing through us and how he's changing the world because Southern Baptists showed up with the gospel. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to work among a people who are gospel focused and who are working so hard to do what we do, which is get the gospel to the whole world.